Artistic Director for Des Moines Metro Opera, and it is my pleasure to welcome you here tonight for this production. It's a brand new production, new scenery that we've created in collaboration with Virginia Opera, and we're very proud of the production. I think you're going to enjoy it very, very much. This is a part of our 2014 festival season, and I'm sure it goes without saying that most all of you, if not everyone in the room, has already gotten all of their tickets for the rest of the season. In fact, they've probably already seen the other two operas. But for the one or two people that maybe haven't yet, I want to tell you that it's a fantastic season. We have two other productions this season that we're offering that are actually quite unusual. And while many of you may have seen Traviata many times, these other two operas you may never have the chance to see again. We're offering, and in fact, they couldn't probably be more diametrically opposed. We have tomorrow night the final performance of Rossini's Le Comptorie, which is by the composer of The Barber of Seville, but an alternative comic offering. It's a fantastic cast, a brand new production. The audiences have loved it, and there are, I would probably say, maybe 10 to 15 tickets left for tomorrow's show. So if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to race down and get tickets because it's wonderful. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have a wonderful new opera called Dead Man Walking, based on the book and the film of the same name, and audiences have absolutely eaten this show up. It is extraordinarily moving, an opera about redemption, forgiveness, and with a very, very current theme, very modern theme, and a certain resonance that has moved audiences very much over the course of the season. There are also a handful of tickets for that, so if you haven't been, I encourage you to do so. Tonight you'll be seeing Verdi's Traviata. We pride ourselves at Des Moines Metro Opera on taking extraordinary care and attention to detail on every production we do, whether it's something unusual like the other two operas I was mentioning, or one of the standard operas that are produced often at Des Moines Metro, at other companies. We take great care and attention to detail in presenting this production. This is the first time we've done Traviata in 14 years, and so in that sense it's just as much a rarity as other pieces in the repertoire for us. And so with that in mind, we approach it with great care, with great reverence, and in our attempts to provide you with a quality experience with this piece. Before I turn the preview over here, I will say that I see in the audience tonight many folks who are longtime friends and ticket buyers, and we thank you for that. I see also in the audience many people who have been contributors, not just to this year's annual campaign, but for many years, and for that we are very grateful. I don't think I'm telling you anything you probably don't know when I say that these are very challenging days we live in for the arts, and support is greatly appreciated at all times. Those of us who work in the arts come to work every single day, very mindful of the fact that in today's climate we have to wage a very fierce battle to defend the art form that we so greatly love, and we appreciate those of you who have joined us in the fight. If you have not yet, it is never too late. We always appreciate your support and your involvement, your concern, and the care that you show for this great company. And now, it is my pleasure to turn the preview over to a member of our music staff, Mr. Elvin Little, at the piano. And actually, tonight we have the rare treat to have a member of our cast who will present a good portion of tonight's preview. Derrell Acon spent the last year as a Fulbright scholar in Milan, all parts of Italy, studying the works of Verdi and in particular attention to this opera. And so it seemed like a very natural fit for us to have him speak to you tonight before he goes downstairs to get in the costume. You can look for him on the stage when you see him. But he's here tonight to speak to us about Traviata, and I know you'll enjoy hearing him very much. Without further delay, enjoy the preview and enjoy the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us tonight. It is with great pleasure and excitement that I present tonight's preview talk for one of the great operas of the repertoire, Giuseppe Verdi's La Traviata. Some of my research dealt with Verdi and heroines, so of course tonight I'll be talking mostly about Violetta, our current heroine. And I just want to say a couple words on my research because a lot of stuff I'll refer to actually deals with that research. So the main portion of my research deals with something called spiritual agency. Excuse me for going right into it, but we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to go for it. So spiritual agency, of course, is not a phrase that we hear a lot in common conversation, so I just want to give you an example of what that might mean. Spiritual agency, as I define it, is the ability for a female character within an opera to have legitimacy and agency extra-operatically. So what that means is no matter what the composer composes, no matter what the librettist writes, that female character, if she has the ability to legitimately convince you as an audience member that she is the most religiously sound person in the opera, then she has a power beyond anyone else in the opera. So for example, if we think of Verdi's, a later opera of Verdi's, Un ballo in maschera, our heroine in the opera is Amelia. And this character is, of course, so beautifully religious and so pious, and as audience members, we go through her journey. And at the end of the opera, the king dies, but because the king has loved Amelia, although he has engaged in not so religious and not so pure acts throughout the opera, because he has loved this woman, we believe as audience members that he's going to go to heaven. Because if he loves her and if she loves him, then he's probably holy, he's probably pure. It's very subtle, but it happens. If you think about some of the operas you might have seen in the past, you'll realize that although some characters might be suspect, oftentimes we give them a free pass if the women in the operas love them. So that's spiritual agency. As I said before, I want to talk mostly about Violetta Ballerini, but I want to start with her actual real-life counterpart. In 1824, someone was born by the name of Alphonsine Plessis. And she would come by her early 20s to be the most popular and famous courtesan in all of France. And by the time, of course, she became a courtesan, she started calling herself Marie Duplessis. She said she chose the name Marie after the Virgin Mary, and keep in mind she's a courtesan, so there's a bit of irony going on there. And then Duplessis, of course, because in French, Du is from, and so she just took her original last name, Duplessis. Marie Duplessis was so famous that when she died at the ripe age of 23, not so ripe, I'm being a little sarcastic, it was a very unfortunate death, of course, but she actually had a relationship with someone we might all know by the name of Alexandre Dumas fils, a famous librettist actually and novelist and poet. This relationship was actually a very famous relationship because Alphonsine, or Marie, as she would come to be called, was so popular throughout Paris and throughout all of France actually, that to have such a powerful woman with such a powerful and well-known figure in Parisian culture was just something to be looked after. So much so that when she died, there was actually an auction for all of Paris to come buy some of her things out of her apartment. That's how well-known she was. But what I want to do now is I want to read you a letter, the breakup letter actually, from Alexandre Dumas to Marie Duplessis, because after a while, he broke up with her. In 1845, 2 years before her death, he said, okay, this is enough, I can't take anymore. And I just want to read this letter because I think if you listen closely to what he says in this letter, you'll find out some key things about Marie Duplessis. And of course, I'm doing this in the effort of just building a little more of a fuller character around Violetta Ballerini. Because that's what, if I can say to you nothing else in today's talk, is that Violetta Ballerini is not weak and she is not powerless. Those are the two things I hope you remember. If you don't remember anything else I say, remember that she is not weak, she is not powerless. Because some of the characters in the opera, some of her music, some of her actions, some of her words might confuse you. But if you really think about it, this is not a weak woman. So let's go to the letter. This is 1845. My dear Marie, I am not rich enough to love you as I would wish, and not poor enough to love you, to be loved as you would desire. So let us both of us forget. You, a name which should be almost indifferent to you. I, a happiness that has become impossible for me. There is no need for me to tell you that I am sad, since you already know how much I love you. Goodbye then. You have too much heart not to understand why I write this letter, and too much intelligence not to be able to forgive me for it. So that is the letter. I mean, it's humorous for us, of course, because it's funny how he changes everything around at the end there, kind of turns it all on Marie Duplessis. But what I want to point out about the letter is he tells a couple key things about what her character must have been like. And so the most clear things are, one, that she was a loving person, and two, she was an intelligent person. He says those very blatantly. But I also want to bring your attention to that first line, because I think it says something else, a little more subtle. He says, I am not rich enough to love you as I would wish, and not poor enough to be loved as you would desire. So let us remember that we're dealing with 19th century culture here. So this is a man that's saying that he doesn't have enough money to necessarily exercise the type of power over this seemingly very domineering character in Marie de Blasius. But he's not poor enough to be okay with someone traversing the societal norms of women being inferior to men or women playing a certain role within relationship. So what does it tell us about Marie de Blasius? That she thinks that a relationship should be absolutely equal. This is a woman that she's not willing to just go with the flow, whatever society says, she goes with it. No, she thinks that actual pure love, and you'll see reminiscences of this in Traviata, pure love involves equality. And so you'll see that carry on throughout her next counterpart being, a year after her death, she died in 1847. The next year, 1848, Alexandre Dumas, after the breakup and everything, he was so nice as to write a book based on his relationship with Marie de Blasius. La Dame aux Camélias is the direct source of La Traviata that Verdi and Francesco Maria Piave, our librettists of tonight's opera, would use. So in La Dame aux Camélias, the heroine is Marguerite Gautier. And she is very much the same. She is a courtesan and she has this relationship. But just subtle things began to change. And of course, by the time we get to Verdi's opera, which was premiered in 1853, we get the Violetta that you will see tonight. And so, what I want to say next is just a little bit about being a courtesan. Because I feel like today, because courtesans don't really exist, especially in American culture, the way they existed in the 19th century. And a lot of times we might deflate the terms courtesan and prostitute because they seem like they may be the same thing, but in reality, in 19th century terms, they are two completely different things. So the next thing I'm going to read you is someone who makes a great distinction between the two. This is Jonathan Lucy in his book, Who's Who in Verdi. It's a very simple title, it's actually a very scholarly book, and I would recommend it for any of you. I have reading lists over here that I'll offer you at the end of the talk, and it's on there, so I would actually recommend it. He's very scholarly and very insightful for all of Verdi's 27 operas. So this is what Lucy says about courtesans. It is in the nature of the courtesan's profession that she transgresses the normal conception of love. There is no possibility of faithfulness. She will, by definition, be faithless. Yet the courtesan, as opposed to the prostitute who hawks her wares on the street corner, may give the semblance of love. The prostitute may issue prohibition against this or that intimacy to ensure that the transaction remains strictly physical with no possibility of interpersonal communication. Not so the courtesan. She maintains her freedom by virtue of the fact that she cannot be possessed. Thus her life is a constant struggle to consolidate her freedom by delineating her uniqueness. So let's keep that in mind during this talk and also as you watch this opera, is don't just think just because Violetta is a courtesan that she's, what in our current day society we might consider a prostitute. Because courtesan in the 19th century, especially at the degree of Violetta Valadier and Marie de Blasius, the real life counterpart, it was a pretty high stature. This was someone who lived a very high-class life. By the bank account, her friends, and also just her circle of people with whom she interacted. So now I want to move into a little bit of the music. If you heard anything about Traviata, you've probably heard this music, the Brindisi, which goes a little something like this. So what I want to say about the Brindisi is whatever you do, do not consider this piece outside of its context in the opera. I feel like this is one of the downfalls of La Traviata because we hear the Brindisi all the time. You can never hear La Traviata in your entire life, but you may hear the Brindisi 50 times throughout your life because it's just such a popular piece and it's such an uplifting tune. But the reason I say that is because the Brindisi is actually a very important installment within the context of the opera. And so what I want to point out about that is that imagine who it is who motivates this Brindisi. When the opera starts, we are in the 19th century, operas dealt a lot with dance motive, dance beat, as I'm sure a lot of us know. You saw this tell you, I didn't know this, of course, until I researched it, that the opera starts in a polka. That's the dance beat that it starts in a polka. And then once someone offers up a toast, or brindisi, that's what brindisi is in Italian, is a toast. First they offer it to the baron and he declines, and then they ask Alfredo to do the toast. And he pushes us into this beat, which is no longer polka, but is a waltz. And this is very significant in terms of 19th century culture and meanings, because the waltz has a very specific meaning. I want to read you a little bit about what a waltz might have meant in the 19th century, just so we can get a little bit more about Alfredo's characters and his motivation. So this comes from Emilio Sala's book, The Sounds of Paris, which is also on the list. He describes the waltz as a close couple dance, long deemed obscene. It was understood throughout the 19th century to have the remarkable ability to stir up erotic thoughts of seduction, of arousal, and fulfillment of sexual desire. And so I say that to say that no matter how innocent or charming Alfredo may seem, there is something underneath there. There's a secret motivation. It's not secret for very long, but there's something else. And this waltz, of course, it is recurring throughout his motives. The next thing he says to Violetta, once the chorus clears the stage, he talks to her about how he has loved her, how he has visited her every day when she was sick. Violetta, of course, as I said before, she's a happy woman. She has a lot of friends, she has money, she's beautiful. Every man wants her. Her only problem in life is that she has consumption. She has tuberculosis. And so that's a bit of a struggle. And she went through this long spell where people actually thought she was going to die. And during that period, that is when Alfredo would come and visit her. And that's when he fell in love with her. And so when he tells her about that day, he says, "Un di felice," on that happy day, I came and I knew I would be loved and I would be moved to this love that is the pulse of the entire universe. And that love motive that he used in the music and that Verdi composed is a theme, is the most recurring theme throughout the entire opera. So I'm going to have Eldon play that for you now, and I'm going to translate as we go along, because you'll find out as you see the opera tonight that it is very important in any understanding of the opera. So here he's talking about the love. He said this love that is the pulse of the entire universe. He says it's mysterious and dignified. Pain and delight. Both. Violetta, being the beautiful woman that she is, of course, she's very used to having men falling head over heels for her. And her usual strategy is to just flee. And so the first thing she says to Alfredo, she says, "If what you tell me is true, then go away from me. Because I can't offer you any love. All I can offer you is friendship. I don't know how to love. I just want to enjoy my life. I just want to drink. I just want to be happy. I just want to be with my friends." And so you'll hear, in the way Verdi sets this next music, you can hear her sort of laughing at him even. And I think she's exercising that agency I was talking about before, to the point that she's just laughing in his face, saying, go away from me if this is actually what you think. And you'll hear the fleeting melody. Giggles, basically. So, once Alfredo actually leaves, the first thing she says is "estrano," which means that's strange. All these men for years have been coming after her, but she says "estrano." This particular case, "estrano." She says something has stirred up in her that is unusual. Perhaps she is meant to love. Perhaps love is a joy that she has yet to experience that she would like to. And so this Sempre Libera is her next aria, and she talks about, yes, I just want to live, I just want to have fun, I just want to drink. But then, of course, the second act opens, and we find out that she and Alfredo are, of course, a couple. And so our initial thought may be, oh my goodness, just another fickle woman in opera. You know, she says one thing, and in the next act, she's, you know, completely negated her earlier sentiments. But what I want to point out is that remember that the second act of the opera, we're not a 19th century audience that would have a libretto right in front of them, so they would know that the second act actually is 5 months later. So seemingly they've had time to flirt, they've had time to learn a little something about each other, to discuss what kind of relationship Violetta might want and might be willing to pursue. And then by the second act, of course, they had moved together into a country far away. A country house, not another country. They're still in France, but they moved to the country. And at this point, Alfredo's father comes, Giorgio Germont Père. He comes and he tells Violetta, if you do not leave my son, you're going to ruin my entire family. So this love that she has cultivated all of a sudden, just like that, has been called into question. And the reason he has this authority is because of her past, she doesn't have the legitimacy to be married in the church. So she and Alfredo will never have the opportunity to be married. And so he's saying that because of this impure love, my other daughter will never have a husband because the reputation of my family has been tarred. And so what I want to point out about this duet is that a lot of people, even scholars, consider Giorgio Germont, the father, to be the most powerful figure in the entire opera. I actually disagree. As I said before, I think that because Violetta acts with this extra operatic agency that she actually is. And I'm going to give you an example now of the conversation they have. You know, a lot of times in opera, when two people are talking about two argumentative stances, let's say, one character will speak in this language, being a certain melody, a certain musical language, and then another character will respond in a different melody, a different musical language. And so I'm just going to carry you through the duet, and I'm going to tell you who's talking, I'm going to translate as we go, and then I'll point out the turning point, in my opinion. So first we have Giorgio Germont. Here he's talking about his daughter. He says she's as pure as an angel, and if you don't give up this love, you're going to ruin everything. She won't have the chance to actually fulfill her angelic duty. And Violetta responds not with this soaring melody, but with something a little more frantic, a little more urgent, something like this. She says, you don't know what this love means to me. Alfredo has promised me to give me absolutely everything. I've sacrificed everything for him and for this love. And this next section is what I think is a turning point. Remember, Giorgio Germont is considered by some to be the most powerful figure in the opera. And so he's going to start this next excerpt, and he's saying that you're beautiful now, but, and before he can even finish his sentence,